Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to receive this award tonight, named for my dear friend and colleague, Thomas Szasz. As Thomas Szasz wrote years ago, the only true political virtue is obedience to authority, and the only true political sin is independence. The controversy regarding the myth of mental illness and psychiatry is not about science or medicine, it's about power. When psychiatrists start agreeing with you, well then perhaps you ought to reconsider your position. We cannot tell who is mentally ill and who is not by looking at pictures of their brains or analyzing their blood. Psychiatrists had to invent their own book of diseases because pathologists would have nothing to do with them. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the DSM, a great work of fiction.
There is no denying that psychological and emotional problems, even severe mental distress, can affect most anyone. But does this mean we are all insane? What causes psychological distress? Early psychiatrists thought it was an imbalance of the humors that could only be cured by bleeding patients with knives or leeches. Other psychiatrists believed mental problems came from organs like the tonsils, the stomach, and the spleen, and cut them out. Later were attempts to alter brain function, but these efforts also failed. Today, psychiatrists tell us that the way to fix unwanted behavior is by balancing brain chemistry with a pill. Did they get it right this time?
They say you have a chemical imbalance of serotonin and dopamine, but there's never been a study to ever prove that, ever. It's just been indoctrinated into the culture and television advertising to the point where people now believe it is fact.
Despite this lack of evidence, psychiatrists will tell you that psychotropic drugs are just like mainstream medical drugs. Can this be true? The answer is that unlike a drug such as insulin that corrects a measurable and proven imbalance in the body, psychotropic medications have no visible or measurable physical abnormality to correct.
Selective serotonin, reuptake inhibitors. Oh, why you wanna mess with the kid's brain and take away everything that made him a human being? Like his uncommonality and his unique personality and originality. Authority figures hate individuality. If they keep drugging the kids, it's gonna get worse. Psych drugs are a time bomb ready to burst. Take the money out your purse, give it to the nurse. The drugs seem like they're working at first, but even on the drug, life still hurts. And the more that you take, the more it gets worse. The psychiatric medication has become a curse, and then your kid comes home in the back of a hearse. Coming home from the drug-free zone. Coming home from the drug-free zone. Check this out. Oh, they take the brightest kids in the nation and put them on medication and vaccinate them, and they wonder why they can't tolerate them. So they put them on psych meds, and they end up dead. But nobody said they could use health food instead. Messing with your head, can't get out of bed, eyes are turning red, doctor got no cred. You don't have to follow what the psych doc said. You gotta take your life back, put the knife back down. If it's like that, throw the medication on the ground, cause the medical suckers are gonna psych that. And if you're speaking your mind, they're gonna strike that. It's time y'all learn, you gotta fight back and take your mind back from the medication trap. And if you get that, then watch your brother's back. These drugs hit you like a chemical bitch slap. Take that, psych doctors. These drug pushers should be arrested. Oh, we used to be a nation that would try to educate kids, but now we focus on ways to medicate kids. We label them as victims and addict them to toxic chemicals that trick them into thinking we somehow fixed them for life. But in reality, it's medical insanity, a chemical calamity, scientific profanity, and it's a horrible mistake that never had to be. Modern psychiatry is guilty of crimes against humanity, and that's the way that it's gonna be, unless you stand up and make the changes you wanna see. A non-medicated mind is ready to be free, but that's too dangerous, don't you see? You might discover your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own philosophy, your own nonconformist views. You might read the alternative press, or you might learn about health online from natural news. You might threaten the status quo, go where nobody goes, follow a path you chose, learn what nobody knows, anger politicos, expose the medicos, hit those foes with low blows from head to toe. Doctors putting kids on speed, they do it for money, not medical need. They try to feed you chemical lies, and that's the truth about SSRIs.
It changes as a result of taking the medication, so when you stop taking the medication, the body's got to change back to the way it was before, if it can, because it can't always. And in doing so, it disrupts the whole system.
In May 1998, 15-year-old Kip Kinkle murdered his parents and 2 classmates, as well as injuring 25 others, after engaging in a shooting spree that ended up in his school's cafeteria. In the investigation, it emerged that he had been taking popular antidepressant medication Prozac since the summer of the previous year. In December 2000, Michael McDermott went on a shooting rampage at his workplace, Edgewater Technologies, killing 7 of his co-workers. During his trial, the court heard testimony that in the weeks before the shooting, McDermott had tripled the dosage of his antidepressant medication, Prozac, from 70 milligrams per day to 210 milligrams. In March 2005, 16-year-old Jeff Weiss shot and killed 9 people, including 5 students at Red Lake Senior High School in Minnesota, before turning the gun on himself. It was later revealed he had been undergoing treatment for depression and had been on Prozac at the time. In September 2008, Finnish post-secondary student Matti Saari shot and killed 10 other students on campus before killing himself. The official Finnish government report on the incident revealed that he had been taking an SSRI medication at the time of the shooting. SSRI stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor, and it is a class of drugs that is often used to treat depression and anxiety. It includes Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, Paxil, and a host of other commonly prescribed antidepressants. And the perpetrators of a raft of school shootings, mass murders, and other violent incidents in recent years have been taking them. And so it was perhaps not surprising when the culprit of this month's mass shooting at Fort Hood, Specialist Ivan Lopez, turned out to be taking unnamed antidepressants himself.
We have very strong evidence that he had a medical history that indicates unstable psychiatric or psychological condition.
Lopez had been prescribed powerful antidepressants and the sleep drug Ambien. He was getting help. Dr. Javier Amador interviewed Major Nadal Hassan, who killed 13 people here at Fort Hood in 2009. Mental health issues, he says, must be aggressively treated, particularly when antidepressants are given.
You have to be very cautious and take care to be aware of which symptoms are improving more quickly than others. People's motivation comes back, their ability to sleep comes back, they feel more energy, but they're still feeling hopeless and suicidal.
Although it is yet to be reported, and may in fact never be revealed, precisely what type of antidepressant Lopez was taking, or whether it was an SSRI, the number of confirmed SSRI shooters in recent years has raised the question of a causal link between the medication and incidents of violence. Although the drug manufacturers are quick to downplay this connection as anecdotal or coincidental, mounting scientific evidence points to a strong correlation between the use of psychiatric drugs in general, and SSRIs in particular, and violent behavior. In 2010, the Public Library of Science published a study titled Prescription Drugs Associated with Reports of Violence Towards Others, which examined how 484 drugs were associated with 1,937 documented cases of violent behavior. Of those 484 drugs, 31 of them were responsible for 79% of the violence, including 11 antidepressants. When incidents of school massacres in the U.S. are charted against prescription of psychiatric medication, the correlation is undeniable. Further research is needed to establish if there is a causal linkage between these pharmaceuticals and the incidence of violence, but critics of the big pharmaceutical manufacturers complain such research is hampered by the low standards for reporting that these companies are held to.
Police department?
Yeah. I just killed my 2 daughters.
Sir?
Yeah.
Tell me what happened. Okay, what's going on right now?
I just freaked out and killed them.
Are you on medication?
Yeah.
What kind of meds are you on, sir?
I'm on
rash. We're not talking about dry mouth. We're not talking about nausea. We're talking about sudden, compulsive, overwhelming suicidal or homicidal urges. We're talking about violent deaths. We're talking about crippling injuries.
Psychiatric drugs are rampant in society today. It's become really an epidemic.
4 hours of taking 25 milligrams of Zoloft, I was standing on a balcony at a church. And again, there was the thinking, I'm going to jump.
Psychiatrists have carved out a great niche for themselves in the prescribing of drugs, but if you look at the history of treating people for mental and psychological disorders, it's a history fraught with things that don't work.
Psychiatric drug out there that's going to fix a problem. At best, it's going to cover up symptoms. At worst, it might kill you.
There are numerous reports of significant violent acts, not just suicide, but significant violent acts of murder-suicides in patients who were being prescribed antidepressants for relatively minor conditions, and they then just snapped.
The drugs that are used are known worldwide to increase suicidality and increase homicidal violence.
Might there be a link between the school shootings or the extremely violent shootings that have occurred in the U.S. and the prescription of certain psychotropic medications? I think the answer to that is a clear yes.
The school shootings that have happened here over the last several years in this country, most of the students who engaged in this violent behavior were on psychotropic medications that had been prescribed to them by psychiatrists.
The average surgeon earns $255,438 per year. Non-surgical doctors in the U.S. earn between $186,044 and $339,738 per year. Despite the propaganda coming from the government, law enforcement agencies, the movie industry, and the top lieutenants of the drug cartels, the average crack cocaine dealer makes less than minimum wage annually. We've been trained to think of doctors as lifesavers and to consider unlicensed drug dealers as killers. The facts prove otherwise. Deaths caused by illicit drug overdoses range from 3,800 to 5,200 per year in the US. Deaths caused by firearms, including suicides and homicides, was 29,974 in 2005. By the most egregiously inflated estimate, illegal US drug dealers may have been involved in 35,174 deaths in 2005. In 2005, the number of deaths from adverse pharmaceutical reactions from properly prescribed drugs was a colossal 118,000. This number doesn't count medical mistakes, fatal procedures, or diseases that were caused by the medications. Statistically, doctors in the US are over 3 times more deadly than gun owners and drug dealers combined.